All right. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the one and only Wrestling Otaku channel. Of course, your personification of excellence on YouTube and YWC. We're the best reviews wrestling and your three-time YWC channel of the year. And I'm back here. It is now officially Sunday, June 15th of 2025. Happy Father's Day to everybody. Happy Father's Day to all of you, all the fathers, dads out there. Anybody celebrates it. Happy Father's Day, man. Be sure to celebrate today. Be sure to honor and cherish, your fathers and so on and so forth. I've actually got something special that I'm going to give my dad a little later on, when I go out tomorrow, so yeah, I got a little something planned, nothing big, nothing special, but yeah, so just happy Father's Day to everybody, and definitely a very important day. And for those of you, who still have your father, because, there's a good number of people who don't, be sure to, honor, love, and cherish, your father and your parents. That's always, a big thing for me. But anyway, happy Father's Day, and happy Sunday as well. So it is late night here. It's actually a little past 3 a.m. Prime time for doing videos for yours truly. So I figured I'd go ahead and do a video here while I'm thinking about it. A little kind of fun, different video that a little different vibe that I want to bring with this video. So here today, I got a little, shall we say, I don't know if you call it necessarily fantasy booking. It's more like just kind of me throwing ideas, kind of throwing my ideas out there, because that's sometimes what I like to do with this channel and these videos, and just, for my presence on social media in general, is I like to have fun and just kind of throw fantasy, various things out there. I've done stuff like this in the past, so here today, I'm here to throw out a special pitch, my personal pitch, my idea of if I ever became a pro wrestler, and I got hired and I got signed by AEW, what my gimmick, what my character would be. This is basically my pitch or my idea for a character, for a gimmick in AEW if I were signed as a wrestler in AEW. I've done videos similar to this in the past, just talking about, ideas that I would have for me personally as a wrestler. Because for those of you who don't know, I actually once did aspire to become a wrestler. Like way back when I was a teenager, coming up in middle school, high school, this is during a period where I loved pro wrestling. I watched wrestling as a teenager, even when everybody around me didn't care for it. All I ever heard was, oh, wrestling is fake, it's scripted, it's just two guys in tights grappling on each other. Oh, why do you watch that? All that kind of shit. Because, here in the town that I live in the area I live in, wrestling was not very big back in the day. It was not super big, or it wasn't very popular like when I was coming up. There was only ever a handful of people that I spoke to growing up in my the schools that I went to that ever watched or even cared about wrestling. So like I could count on one hand the number of people that I talked to that watched wrestling in addition to me when I was in middle school, high school. So not a very big audience. I mean, just this area. Now it's a little more well known, which is ironic because wrestling isn't as big as it used to be. Back in the early 2000s, back in the 90s and early 2000s, when you had the Monday Night Wars and all that, and the Attitude Era and shit. It's kind of the opposite here. Back then, at least for me anyway, as a kid, as a teenager growing up, not a whole lot of people liked wrestling. Not a whole lot of people that I knew watched wrestling and stuff when I was coming up. Nowadays, it's a little more, I can go out and speak with people, talk with people. I've actually had conversations out in public with people about AEW and about certain wrestling promotions and stuff. Even at my job, I've had discussions with people about wrestling here and there. But yeah, so this is just something that I grew up dreaming about. I've had daydreams about becoming a wrestler, and I even took weight training classes when I was in high school for like a couple years, with the idea that maybe someday I could get into it, but ultimately it never worked out just because of various things. I mean, there are no wrestling schools here in the state of Maryland. I would have to travel. I would have to go out of state, and I just didn't have the means to do that. So it's just one of those things. It was never meant to be. It's just one of those things that you kind of look back. I look back on, and I was like, what could have been? If I had the opportunity to, what could have been? And that's kind of the reason. Another part of the reason why I have this channel and I do these videos, because this is kind of me just speaking on, sharing my experiences and sharing my love for pro wrestling and my passion for pro wrestling. And, if I can't be in the business myself, then the next best thing would be to have a channel and a platform where I can just, share and express, my passion for pro wrestling and my, my history of enjoying it, so on and so forth. And that's where videos like this come from. So yeah, So for this video, like getting back to getting back on track here, I just had to just go over that briefly. But getting back on track here. This video, I will be just briefly explaining what my idea would be for my own character, for my own gimmick, if I was a wrestler in AEW. Now, let's say one day I became a wrestler just randomly. I know it's very unlikely at 36, and not exactly in the best of shape. I'm not exactly in ring shape. I mean, I probably could be if I really wanted to, but I don't know if anybody's looking at a 36-year-old who never had any experience in wrestling in the business and saying, "Oh yeah, let's bring him in." Let's. But again, this is the fantasy element of it. I'm just kind of throwing ideas out there. But let's say hypothetically I became a wrestler, and let's say hypothetically Tony Khan called me up and said, "Hey, I want you in AEW," and then I came in. And he basically came to me and asked me for an idea, or what ideas I would have for a gimmick, for my gimmick, if I were when I debut on TV. This would be what I would tell him. So basically, and I think I've made a video or two about this before. I don't know if it was on my previous channel or not. I might have done it like in the beginning stages of this channel, but I'm pretty sure the previous video I did is no longer up. So this is pretty much a redo, if you will, of the previous video I did. But anyway, and a revision, if you will, of the previous video I did. But anyway, so my idea for wrestler is basically I would be, in a sense, kind of true to what I am, and that is a Maryland native. I would be, for lack of a better term, I would be a individual who was proud of where I come from, or I expressed, that I was proud of where I come from, which obviously, again, I'm from Maryland. I still am today. So my gimmick would be that I'm a Maryland native, or that I'm a Maryland nationalist, again, for lack of a better term. You know how sometimes people in wrestlers, certain wrestlers will have aspects of their gimmick or elements of who they are as people, or where they come from, or they're proud of where they come from, their roots or their heritage or whatever, stuff like that. There's a number of wrestlers over the years who have kind of expressed this in their gimmicks. Like, for example, if somebody comes from Texas, like from the state of Texas, they'll always kind of showcase that, or they'll always be kind of pound their chest and say, "Yeah, I'm from Texas. I'm a Texas native, or I'm a Texas, this and that." And some people will have the Texas flag incorporated into their gear and shit like that. Like, for example, who was I just thinking of? Like, for example, there's a tag team in AEW, what's technically the Ring of Honor, but Dustin Rhodes and Sammy Guevara, and they go by the team name the Sons of Texas. It's like, there you go, there's two guys from Texas, so they're both Texas-born wrestlers, so they go by the tag team name of the Sons of Texas, and that's obviously part of their tag team. That's obviously part of their name. And you look at, or for another example, much more famous example, the Von Erichs. The Von Erichs come from Texas. They're Texas-born and all that, and they incorporate all this into their stuff. Stone Cold Steve Austin, another example. Texas, the Texas rattlesnake. Where do you think that comes from? The Texas rattlesnake. And there's a number of examples I can use. Bradshaw, for example, at least in the beginning, before he got rebranded in 2004. Then he became basically a singles wrestler. From New York or whatever. Or he came from New York City or whatever. Or he moved to New York City, I should say. That's part of his heel stick. But yeah, you get my point. People from Texas, they proudly, state that they're from Texas, or they represent Texas or the state of Texas, shit like that. Okay, people from Texas. In New York, the same thing. There are people who come from wrestlers who come from New York, and they always express it. They always say, "Yeah, I'm from New York," blah blah blah. Like, for example, Eddie Kingston, or whoever. I'm sure I can come up with better examples, but you get where I'm going. The same thing could be said for people from, I don't know, maybe California or Florida, or one of those more well-known states. You know what I'm saying? Even Pennsylvania. People from Philly, or people from even Pittsburgh. Britt Baker, for example. Again, and Kurt Angle is another example. There's people who always express that they're proud of where they come from. That's basically what my gimmick would be. My gimmick would be that I would be a Maryland loyalist or nationalist, pretty much, for lack of a better term. And I would come out, and basically what I would do, and obviously I would be a heel, because I think I work better with that gimmick, with that specific gimmick. I will do better as a heel than a babyface. I think I make a perfect heel. I think I'll make a really good heel in pro wrestling because I know how to get a rise from people. If you if you notice from any of my time here on YouTube, I know how to get under people's skin. I know how to get a rise out of people, and I know how to transition that. I know how I would transition that from what I do on here into in front of a live crowd. Like I know how to get a reaction. I've watched wrestling long enough to know how to get a reaction from people. So I think I would translate. I think it would translate very well. I think I would work well as a heel. I could work as a babyface too because I know the means to kind of get over in that way. But I think I would do much better as a heel, especially with the gimmick that I'm divulging here. But anyway, so basically what I would do is I would go out and part of my gimmick is that I would come out with the Maryland state flag. For anybody who doesn't know what the Maryland state flag is, basically you see it every now and then. Like for example, if you watch an Orioles game, you'll see kind of the flag, the logo of the flag on the patch on the shoulders, shoulder pads of like Baltimore Orioles players or even Ravens players. They have the shield. In terms of the Ravens, they have like the shield with the Maryland flag incorporated into it. So, but if you don't know what the Maryland flag looks like, look it up, Google it. It's simple. But anyway, so I'll come out with the Maryland flag. Either I would have it draped on me, like on my shoulders or my head or whatever, and kind of have it, over me or whatever, almost like a hood. I'll kind of either wear it on me like that, or I would have it on like a pole, and I would bring it with me to the ring, and I would wave it around like when I come in the ring or whatever. And part of my gimmick is that I would come out and I would come in the ring with the Maryland state flag, and I'll basically antagonize the people of whatever place I was at, whatever state or whatever city I was at. I'll come out and antagonize the crowd and basically say, hey, I'm from Maryland, which means I'm better than all of you, pretty much. And, and my gimmick basically would be that I would be a babyface in the state of Maryland, but I would be a heel everywhere else in the United States. That's pretty much would be my gimmick, more or less. Because I'll just be flying that Maryland flag. I'll represent that I'm from the state of Maryland, and that basically because I'm from Maryland, I'm better than anybody from any of the other 49 states. That's pretty much what my gimmick would be, And oh my God, I'm sure somebody's watching right now. So you're basically Bret Hart from 1997? Yes, I'm Bret Hart from '97. Yeah, okay, there you go. But anyway, so that would be my gimmick. I would come out with the Maryland state flag. I'll wave it around, and I'll get on the mic either before a match or during a segment, whatever, be it in the ring or backstage, and I'll basically say what I want to say, and I'd antagonize the crowd, and I'll basically rip on whatever state I was in, whatever city I was in, And I know there are certain places that I know I would do very well in when it comes to that gimmick. I for sure would antagonize people in Pennsylvania. I would definitely antagonize people in Pennsylvania, especially Pittsburgh. If I was in Pittsburgh, for example, I know I have a lot of things to say in regards to getting a rise out of people from Pittsburgh, because I have a lot of shit to say in regards to that city. Just, again, sports fan, Ravens fan. I hate the Steelers. Obviously that would be mentioned. So, yeah. I could get a lot of heat for myself in a place like Pittsburgh. I would antagonize people in Pennsylvania. I would antagonize people from Ohio. I would antagonize people in Florida. I definitely would antagonize people from Texas or California. Really, any place that I was at. Any state that I visit, any city that I'm in, that would be my shtick. I would come out and basically antagonize the crowd and say, I'm from Maryland, therefore I'm better than you. Here in the state of Maryland, we don't do what you idiots in this crowd would do, or something along those lines. If I was in Texas, for example, I'd say, look at all these hicks in Texas. All you uneducated, sloppy hicks in Texas. You wish you had the pedigree of somebody like me from Maryland, or basically something like that. That would pretty much be my shtick. And then obviously I'll go in the ring and I'll do what I would have to do. Now where I would be on the card, that remains to be seen. I personally prefer like a mid card, kind of somewhere in the mid card area, which I'll likely be. That will likely be the ceiling. Maybe upper mid card. You never know. I guess it depends on what. I guess it would depend on what my skill set would be. Which I personally, again, if I got into wrestling, I think I could be pretty good because I've been watching it long enough, and I think I would do well as a wrestler. Just saying. I don't think I would be I don't think I would be on the level of freaking Kenny Omega or Will Ospreay, but I do think that I would do pretty well in the ring. So I guess it'll depend on my skill set, but I would say mid card, upper mid card somewhere. Maybe if I had to do the undercard for a while, it'll be good, and see how the gimmick works, see how it works. And so yeah, that would pretty much be what I would do. That would pretty much be my thing. That would be my shtick. And I think I could make it work, dude. I think I can make that work. If there are other gimmicks, if there are so many gimmicks in wrestling that are just so basic yet they get over with the crowd, I think what I personally would do would get over well in AEW. I think I have the potential and the pedigree and the knowledge and the know-how in terms of the wrestling business and the fandom that I think I could get that shit over. I'm just putting that out there, you know? I'm just putting it out there. So basically that's what I would do. And that is more or less my idea. Now, over time, if I were to get that over, obviously I would transition from basically doing that to kind of a more in-depth or more fleshed out character where, you know, I would still obviously be a Maryland representative, stuff like that, but I would be more in tune with, representing my state and so on and so forth and being loyal and all that kind of stuff. And so I have a few ideas as to how I could continue the character progression and the development, if you will, of my gimmicks. So, but yeah, man, so that's just basically my general idea. And personally, if I started out in wrestling, there's another kind of aspect to it where maybe I start out, for example, as, I don't know, somebody who's like a underling of maybe the Elite or, you know, the Bucks or somebody like that, or maybe I would get in good, quote unquote, with, you know, somebody in power, if you will, or the EVPs, the Bucks or the Elite, and I would get, like, say, a backstage interview job or, you know, something like that or somewhere along those lines, and I would basically antagonize the other employees. I would antagonize the commentators, and then using my quote-unquote pull or my stroke backstage, I would incorporate myself into, you know, matches and stuff like that. I actually would pitch an idea where I would get into a program with, obviously, EVP Kenny Omega, and I could actually see myself wrestling in a match against Kenny Omega. Like, I could honestly see myself doing that at a pay-per-view, possibly for a title. You know, right now he's the international champion, and of course, obviously, as we all know, it's going to be Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay upcoming at All In Texas, and it's going to be for the international title and for the Continental title, winner take all, and they have a new unified version of the belt that they showed on Dynamite this past Wednesday at Summer Blockbuster. So I can see myself down the line, again, using my political pull, if you will, backstage to get myself into a title match with Kenny Omega. And over the course of the next few weeks leading up to that show, or leading up to that pay-per-view, I'll basically antagonize him and basically kind of come out or have segments, pre-recorded segments, or backstage segments and stuff, basically hyping myself up, and I would say, you know, I basically guarantee myself a victory over Kenny Omega. And so, and obviously maybe a face-to-face encounter where I do something, you know, we have like a kind of like almost like a pull apart, not necessarily pull apart, but basically I would take a cheap shot at him or something like that, and, you know, kind of sell the pay-per-view. Then the pay-per-view will come, and I could see myself either being in one of the first couple matches, like not the opening match, but the match after it, or I could see myself being in the penultimate match, which is the second match on the show, second to last match on the show, right before the main event. And if you don't know, if you've been paying attention to AEW shows or AEW pay-per-views, there's usually always a match between the main event and the match before, or, you know, the pre-match, the third to last match on the show. There's usually a match between that and the main event, which they call the penultimate match, which is the second to last match on the card. They usually put a match. They usually have a match scheduled for that specific spot, where it's not as big or not as big of a deal as, say, the main event would be or any other matches on the card would be. And basically they do that so that they can give the crowd a chance to kind of catch their breath and kind of calm down. And it's just basically I don't want to say a filler match, but it's basically like a match that, you know, people will watch between, you know, the match they just saw in the main event to kind of give them a chance to catch their breath and, you know, and then, you know, and then obviously they get excited for whatever the main event would be. So I can see myself being in the penultimate match with Kenny Omega. And obviously the story is, you know, I'm not a wrestler, or I'm not an active wrestler, and you're probably asking yourself, well, why would you put yourself, and you're not a wrestler, why would you put yourself in a program in a match with Kenny Omega at a pay-per-view? That's not right. Well, there's a story behind that. And the story is obviously I would come out and, you know, I'll get some shots in, but I'll, for the most part, get worked over. And then I would have somebody interfere on my behalf. Now, I think it would be a big return, for example. Like, I'm just throwing a name out there. Like, for example, like a Keith Lee, for example. Let's say I wrestle this match with Omega, and then during the match, the referee gets taken out, and Keith Lee comes out and attacks Kenny Omega. And then I use that to my advantage, and I go, to try to obviously beat Omega, and then he basically comes back and whatever and beats me and all that, and so that would pretty much be the idea. But yeah, so I just got this is all stuff that I've kind of thought of. This is all stuff that I kind of put together just in my head. This is just stuff that I think of. So I personally think that would work well. And over the course of the next few weeks afterwards, I would have this allegiance with Keith Lee or whoever it is that I choose, whatever returning wrestler I would choose. And kind of establish kind of like a heel stable or a heel, kind of a thing where I would be more or less, somebody who would kind of intervene on behalf of whoever it was I was following around, so, or whoever it was that was aiding me in matches or whatever. But yeah, so that would pretty much be the idea. But yeah, so that's more or less my pitch or my idea for a wrestler, for a gimmick. If I was ever a wrestler in AEW, that would be my idea or part of my idea. That's just the general basis of what my idea would be, what my gimmick would be. So yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say for that. So yeah, I didn't really have anything more to add than that, but I personally think that if that were the case, because I like to think that I'm fairly creative when it comes to things like this, and I personally think that I can make something like that work. I don't think we've ever seen a wrestler in the history of any promotion where, they state that they're, a Maryland native and they're proud of where they come from. I don't think we've ever had a wrestler from the state of Maryland who basically acknowledges where they come from and, that they're proud of where they come from, and they do basically what I described just now. Kind of I laid out my gimmick or, my idea and my pitch there. But I don't think we've ever had a wrestler like that. So that would be, to me, anyway, an innovative idea or, a unique idea or an original idea. So there might be elements of, previous gimmicks, incorporated. But again, that's my idea, that's my pitch, and I personally think I could make it work. So, but yeah, that's just me throwing ideas out there. So, but yeah, that's all I gotta say for that. So that would be my idea for a wrestler. And also, I talked about this in the past. If I were to create like a faction, for example, I would have it be named something like the Mid-Atlantic Connection, where I would basically take wrestlers from the region and kind of put them together in a faction with me, and we would name it the Mid-Atlantic Connection. And so obviously it would be a heel stable for the most part, and it could be a babyface stable too. But I think I can make that work as well. I did a video about this before. This was like years ago, but I'm kind of revisiting it here. But anyway, that's pretty much all I gotta say for that. So that's my idea for a gimmick, my pitch for a gimmick, for an idea for a wrestler for myself if I were ever in AEW. So that's pretty much all I gotta say for that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think of my idea, what you think of, if that would be something you would be interested in seeing, or if you think that will work in an environment like in AEW. Just hit me up, let me know. I appreciate all feedback. And be sure to subscribe to the channel, man, if you haven't already. Appreciate all the support I can get. And that being said, that's pretty much going to do it, man. So thank you for watching this, and have a good rest of your night. Happy Father's Day once again. Until next time, Wrestling Talk, I'm out for now. See you guys later. Peace.